Your grandmother's refrigerator is still running. Not a museum piece, not a restoration project. A working refrigerator humming in a garage or a basement somewhere in this country, built in 1957 or 1962 or 1968, cooling food right now in the year you are watching this video. You know someone who has one, or you had one, or your mother talks about hers the way people talk about something they trusted completely. It never broke, it never needed a technician, it just ran for 60 years, for 70 years. The compressor still works, the seals still hold, the shelves are still level. Now look at the refrigerator in your kitchen. How old is it? There is a specific kind of anger that comes from owning something that should work and watching it fail. Not the clean anger of being cheated, quieter than that, more confusing, because the thing looked fine when you bought it. It had good reviews. It came in a box with a warranty card and a customer service number and a little booklet explaining how much they cared about your satisfaction. And then somewhere between year 4 and year 7, something died inside it. A control board, a pump, a fan motor, a heating element that costs $11 to manufacture and $240 to replace because the technician has to drive out and the part has to be ordered and the labor is billed by the hour, and somehow the total always lands just below what a new one would cost. That is not an accident. In 1924, the major light bulb manufacturers in the world, Philips, Osram, General Electric, met in Geneva and formed a cartel. They called it Phoebus, and they agreed, in writing, to deliberately limit the lifespan of their bulbs to 1,000 hours. At the time, bulbs routinely lasted 2,500 hours or more. Engineers knew how to build them longer. The technology existed, but longer-lasting bulbs meant fewer bulbs sold, so they set a cap. They tested each other's products. Companies that made bulbs lasting too long were fined. The cartel ran for 14 years. That was not the beginning of planned obsolescence. It was just the first time it got documented. The man who gave it a name was an American industrial designer named Brooks Stevens. Stevens stood up at a design conference in Minneapolis and said what everybody in manufacturing already knew, but nobody said out loud. He called it planned obsolescence. He defined it as the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. The press picked it up. Business magazines ran it. Detroit loved it. General Motors had already been doing it since the 1920s under Alfred Sloan, who invented the annual model change specifically to make last year's car feel inadequate. Not broken, just old. Just slightly embarrassing to park in a driveway next to your neighbor's new one. Sloan called it the laws of Paris dressmakers. Every year, a new silhouette. Every year, the old one becomes unwearable, not because anything changed about your body, because the look changed, because they changed it on purpose. But what happened in the 1950s and 1960s was different from fashion. They started building the obsolescence into the object itself, not just making it look dated, making it physically fail. A Maytag washer from 1955 was built to run for decades. The motors were overbuilt. The frames were steel. The repair manual was included in the box because the company assumed you or someone you knew would need to fix it eventually, and they wanted you to be able to. The company ran ads featuring a repairman sitting alone in his shop with nothing to do. The loneliest man in town, they called him. It was a joke. It was also a genuine value proposition. We build things so well that we cannot find work for the people we employ to fix them. That repairman is not sitting alone anymore. Here is how planned obsolescence works in a modern appliance. Not theory, the actual mechanism. First, the control board. Appliances that ran for 40 years before digital controls existed had almost nothing that could fail catastrophically. A motor, a timer, a thermostat, mechanical parts that could be repaired with basic tools by anyone who could follow a diagram. Modern appliances run on circuit boards, small computers managing every function. When the board fails, and it will fail, because capacitors degrade, because solder joints crack under thermal cycling, because components have rated lifespans that engineers know precisely, the appliance stops entirely. Not one broken part you can swap, the whole machine dead. And because the boards are proprietary, made specifically for that model by that manufacturer, the replacement part is only available from the manufacturer at a price they set without competition. And because models change every 2 to 3 years, parts for your specific board are often discontinued within 5 to 7 years of purchase. You are not buying a refrigerator. You are leasing a refrigerator from a company that retains permanent control over whether it continues to work. Second, the materials. The drum of a washing machine made in 1965 was stainless steel, heavy gauge. The drum of most machines made today is thinner steel or plastic-coated metal that corrodes at the bearing points, cracks under vibration, and cannot be economically repaired when it does. The gasket around your dishwasher door is made to last approximately 8 years at normal temperatures before it begins to harden and crack. The engineers who designed it knew that. They specified that material anyway. Third, the design. Older appliances were designed to be serviced. Panels came off, components were labeled, screws were standard sizes. Everything was accessible because accessibility was considered a feature. Modern appliances are often designed specifically to resist service. Proprietary screws, glued panels, components bonded together so that replacing one requires destroying another. Warranties that are voided by opening the machine yourself. Software locks that disable the appliance if it detects unauthorized repairs. This is not incompetence, it is engineering with a specific goal. In 2015, a repair organization in Germany called the UBA published a study on appliance lifespans. They surveyed households across the country on when their appliances failed and why they replaced them. The data was striking. In the early 1990s, large appliances lasted an average of 14 to 15 years before needing replacement. By the time of the study, the average had dropped to 8 years. In some categories, it was worse. Washing machines that lasted over 10 years dropped from 3 out of 10 units to fewer than 2. The researchers found something specific that manufacturers disputed but could not explain away. A statistically significant increase in failures occurring just outside the warranty period, not a few years after warranty, not decades, just outside. As if something was calibrated. In 2017, the Restart Project, a repair organization in London, analyzed 30,000 repair attempts across every major appliance category. 40% of the appliances people brought in for repair were not economically worth fixing, not because they were worn out, because the cost of parts and access to parts made repair more expensive than replacement. They called it the repair death zone. A machine that fails in the repair death zone gets thrown away. Every machine thrown away is another machine sold. The numbers work perfectly if you are selling them. In the United States, 50 to 60 million metric tons of electronic and appliance waste is generated every year. That is not mostly old televisions from the 1980s. It is mostly appliances that are between 5 and 10 years old. Refrigerators, washers, dryers, dishwashers, things that were bought new, worked for a few years, failed in a way that could not be economically repaired, and were hauled to a landfill or a scrap yard. Most of that material is not recycled in any meaningful way. The rare earth metals in the control boards, the refrigerants in the compressors, the plastics in the housings, they go into the ground or they go into the air. There are people in this country who cannot afford to replace an appliance every 8 years, for whom a broken washer is not an inconvenience but a crisis, who spend $300 trying to repair something because they cannot spend $800 replacing it, only to find out the part is discontinued and the machine has to go anyway. The loneliness in that situation is specific. You trusted the thing, you paid for it, you maintained it, and it was designed from the moment it left the factory to fail in a way that would leave you no good options. That is not an accident of manufacturing complexity. That is a business model. There are people fighting it. The right to repair movement has been pushing for legislation in the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom that would require manufacturers to make repair documentation and parts available to independent technicians and consumers. In 2021, the FTC voted unanimously to crack down on manufacturers who use warranty restrictions to block repairs. President Biden signed an executive order directing federal agencies to address anti-competitive repair restrictions. The European Union passed legislation requiring that by 2027, major appliance manufacturers must make spare parts available for 10 years after a product's last sale date. Some manufacturers have begun to respond, some genuinely, some by creating repair programs that are technically compliant but practically difficult, parts available only through certified technicians at prices that still land in the repair death zone. The guy building washing machines in 1965 did not need a law to tell him to include the repair manual in the box. He included it because he assumed you would need it, because he built something he expected to be around long enough to be worth fixing. That assumption is what changed. Somewhere in a garage in this country, there is a refrigerator from 1957. It has never been reprogrammed. It has never sent an error code to a server. It has never required a software update to continue cooling food. It has never told you through an app that one of its components requires a proprietary service visit. It just runs. The person who built it assumed you would still be using it decades later. They built it to survive that assumption. That is a form of respect that is almost impossible to find in an appliance store today. We did not lose the ability to build things that last. We have the materials. We have the engineering knowledge. We have decades of data on exactly which components fail and why and how to prevent it. We lost the decision to. Somewhere between the Phoebus cartel in 1924 and the control board that died in your kitchen in year 6, someone decided that a thing that lasts forever is a thing sold once. And a thing sold once is the worst possible business. Your grandmother's refrigerator is still running. They decided that was a problem.